also curious to hear a little bit more about you. So some have already started, but please feel free to share a bit about yourself. So your name, your role, the company that you work for, maybe where you're calling in from in chat. And then in the meantime, I'll shortly introduce myself and also tell a little bit more about what you can expect from today's webinar. So very nice to meet you again. My name is Sophie, and as a learning solutions advisor at Lepaya, I collaborate with organizations like yours on a day-to-day basis, where we explore your upskilling as well as organizational goals together, and then design relevant and engaging learning experience with, of course, that goal to really make sure that the learning sticks. So I'm excited to tell you more about my experience on how to make learning stick today. We will look into why this is important, and then also explore the learn, practice, apply methodology that Lepaya has developed in order to make learning stick. And I'll try my best to share as many examples and tips and tricks along the way as I can. So feel free to ask any questions in chat. I might be able to pick up on some of them along the way, and otherwise I'll make sure to address them during the Q&A at the end. Cool. So to kick things off, I'm also curious to hear from you. I'll start the poll now. How confident are you that learning sticks within your organization? So from not confident at all being a 1, so most training is usually forgotten, to fairly confident as a 4, that it usually transfers, but it's not really consistent. I see some first results coming in. Very nice. There are few people quite confident. But I think all in all, we see from the results that it's neutral. So it really depends on the program. And there's also some lower confidence, so that sometimes it sticks and often it does not. And if we take a look at research, we actually see that only 10 to 15% usually is transferred. So research shows that in many formal training contexts, only 10 to 15% of what is learned is then actually transferred to the work context. And we see that, well, some learners don't even try. Most of the learners, they give it a go, they make some attempts, but then eventually they have to give up. And then there are a few that really do successfully apply their skills. But then the question is, of course, why is it so important to make learning stick? So, well, according to HBR, we annually spend more than 360 billion US dollars on corporate training, which is, of course, a lot of money, especially if learning transfer doesn't happen. But I think even more important, in my opinion, we see more and more skill gaps arising around us. And there really is this continuous need for upskilling. So really making sure that training becomes therefore more and more important, but also that it sticks. And then if we take a look at research by Burson and Deloitte, it shows that learning transfer, when this happens, it actually results in a productivity increase and performance increase, which is 3 times higher for organizations that effectively transfer learning to the workplace than those that don't. And next to a performance increase, we also see that it improves retention. So research by Gallup shows that employees are 50% more likely to stay if they see that what they learn actually transfers to their day-to-day jobs. Well, let's then dive into why it is so difficult to make learning stick and what really drives it. So I'd like to first of all hear from you. If you think of a training that you once took that didn't stick, why do you think that that was the case? Please feel free to reflect a little bit on it and then share in chat with us. I already see some first answers coming in. The topic wasn't maybe relevant. I wasn't interested in it. They didn't choose the topic. Support throughout departments. It was a one-off. That's a good one. Lucas? They don't want to be in the training. Yeah, so relevance seems to be an important topic. And then the application of learning after the training. They didn't practice the learnings. Very nice. Implementation. Really nice. So thanks for sharing, and feel free to continue to share, because I totally agree and also already recognize quite some reasons that were also mentioned by research by, for example, Taylor and Francis. So one of the top reasons why learning doesn't stick is that often it's disconnected from real work. So alignment and relevance, also mentioned in the chat quite a few times, are really key. So are the skills that we're training clearly tied to business or organizational goals? Are they linked to team and individual challenges? And are then, so the topics that we train, are they relevant, but also the cases that we use in the training? Is there room to work with those and really receive that personal feedback? And then it also is about culture. So within your organization, is experimentation, but also learning on the job encouraged? Or might there be a fear of making mistakes and experimenting and trying new things out? And then also, what does leadership commitment look like? Do they role model these behaviors? So do they, for example, prioritize training? And is there a sense of importance that they create around training? Well, then a second reason also mentioned in the chat is that there is too little chance to practice in the training room as well as outside of the training room. So is the training really focused on practicing, or is it maybe more focused on lecturing or sharing information? And then on the job, can we really create those everyday moments where skills can then be practiced in that flow of work? And is there maybe room for peer discussion, shadowing reflections, all these kinds of elements? And then lastly, often learners don't really feel supported. So managers as well as their buddies don't check in. There's a lack of structured follow-up. I think I also saw that already mentioned in chat, where there's no nudges, no reminders of that training and to really apply what you have learned, as well as that there often is no digital resources or follow-up to continue to refresh that skills and knowledge. Nice. So at Lepaya, we've built our entire approach around solving that challenge. And it incorporates a lot of research. And we call our approach learn, practice, and apply. It's simple, but it is a very powerful framework that really ensures that learning sticks and is designed to drive that application on the job. So as you can see here, the learner journey consists of 3 steps. And in every step, we prepare the learner for the next step, all leading up to that moment of application of their newly learned skills on the job. So every training topic starts in the learn phase. And this is a digital, self-paced phase in which learners prepare themselves for the classroom session using the Lepaya app. This is then followed by the practice phase, which is a 3-hour face-to-face or virtual training session during which learners practice, practice, practice. And then at the end of that training session, learners will commit to applying their skills. And this transitions us into that apply phase. And throughout the apply phase, we remind them, but also help them prepare to apply their skills on the job, which happens digitally again. And then these 3 phases are supported by the learner's environment. And this includes the manager, as well as a dedicated buddy group that is assigned at the start of a program. So before I'll deep dive into each of these stages, but also show you the interventions and tools that we use to make learning stick in each of them, I'm curious, which part is hardest to get right in your organization? Is it the learning phase, so really that preparation for the training sessions? Is it the practice, so the training session itself and the engagement there, or the application of those skills on the job? I'll open the poll again. I also already see some first answers coming in chat, which is of course also, please feel free to share. So a very quick answer on apply, which seems to almost be an anonymous vote. And now also some more answers coming in on indeed practice and learn. So I'll share the results with you. So what I can see from the poll, which also is what I often see when interacting with a lot of organizations, is that this application phase is the most difficult one to really establish. And there are also a few people that mentioned learn and practice. Would be great if you could maybe share some examples of what is hardest or what your challenges are in these phases in chat, and then I can see if I can maybe share some experiences or tools, tips and tricks on that as well. So let's deep dive into those different phases. So looking at the learn, practice and apply phases, each training topic starts with the learn phase. And like I mentioned earlier, this is a self-paced digital journey, which learners complete on their mobile or desktop. And in this phase, we inspire them why this skill is crucial in their day-to-day work life, so how it will benefit them in their role. We already inform them on the most important frameworks, concepts, theories. And lastly, most importantly, we ask them to reflect on their personal situation and prepare a case for the classroom session. And preferably that case is a situation that's still in the future, so that we can really help the learner prepare for that situation and thus that application moment. But of course, it's also possible to practice with a situation that has already happened in the past, because then we can reflect upon this and see how we can further improve and build those skills and that confidence for future situations. And we do this online in our so-called bites, and they include a huge range of formats. So it can be videos, quizzes, interactive articles. We also make use of AI coaching to already test for understanding and practice their skills. And because we do all of this in the learn phase, this allows us to, in that practice phase, really focus. So in that training session, really focus on practice, practice, practice. Our trainings are interactive, high-paced, and then also full of opportunities to practice with your own case, receive personal feedback. And in those training sessions, we often not only work with a trainer, but also with a training actor. So an example of a typical training session would be that we start with an introduction round where we discuss everyday situations, experiences, and techniques that are connected to the training topic of today. So really to ease into the topic and the skill that we're discussing. Next, we wouldn't repeat or explain the theory or concepts from scratch. Since the learners have already familiarized themselves with these concepts in the learn phase, we can directly move to checking their understanding by, for example, using a role play that they observe, where the actor and the trainer are, well, giving an example of a conversation, and learners will see what's going well, what can be improved, whether the framework, for example, was applied correctly. And only then learners will move into trying it out themselves. And we usually start with an everyday situation. So cases that are contextualized to the organization or to the team. So to really give them the opportunity to, well, try out the different techniques, start feeling more comfortable with it before we move into practicing with their own case. And when practicing with their own case, we always aim for 2 rounds to really make sure that they can receive, but then also incorporate that feedback from the trainer, the training actor, but also their peers, and really feel that difference and then build that confidence. And then there is the end of that training session. And I think we've all experienced it, that you've had an amazing training and you leave the room with the best intentions to start doing things differently. But as soon as you step out of that training room, life happens. You're off to your next meeting, Slack messages are coming in, emails are waiting for you. And before you know it, you don't apply what you have learned. And if we take a look at the retention curve by Ebbinghaus, we also see that if you don't reinforce what you have learned in the next month, you forget 70 to 90% of what you've learned. So that's why during the wrap up of a training session, we do things slightly differently. We don't just ask for goals or takeaways of the session, but we will really ask learners to open their calendar, choose a moment in the next 2 weeks during which they can apply their skills, share that specific date with us, shortly describe the situation, as well as the goals, so the takeaway or insights that they want to use during that application moment. And because they share all of that information with us, we can then personalize the experience after the classroom. So based on the date that they share, 1 week before, we will start reminding them of the moment that they chose, the goal that they set, but also share additional content where they can refresh their knowledge, but also start practicing their skills again to really prepare for that moment, using also, for example, AI role plays online. Then they can also find a digital toolbox online with some deep dive materials, and we call those our post bites. Then on the day itself, we'll wish them good luck. So we'll send them a good luck message with some final tips and tricks of the trainers, as well as a cheat sheet with the framework outlined again and some one-liners for their application moment. And then the day after, we check in. How did it go? Were you able to apply your skills? What went well? What would you further like to improve? So would you maybe like to practice a little bit more? Would you like to plan for a new application moment so that we can start that cycle again? Well, taking a look at our very own learners, we've seen that learners who set a moment of truth have an apply rate of 68% compared to their control group, where we saw that the application rate is only 20%, which is a huge difference. So really making sure that you identify that moment, you make that first moment small. It doesn't directly need to be a presentation for a big group. It can also be a small thing you want to share during a stand-up where you would like to already try out and apply some of your skills. It really makes a difference. Well, next to this, there also is the learner's environment, and they are really key in making learning stick. And for us, it includes the manager as well as their buddy group. So first of all, their manager. Research has shown that it's crucial for learners to understand why they are enrolled in a program, what is expected of them before, during, and after the training program, and also to really create that sense of importance of training by the manager. At the start of the program, managers will receive a program announcement in which they will be informed by email whom of their team members will join the Lepaya program, what the training topics are, what the dates are, and some tips and tricks on how to best support their team members. Well, secondly, as we really feel that both learners and managers have responsibility to involve each other in the learning experience, we also invite learners to have a check-in with their manager to discuss the results of their skill scan. And the skill scan is a 360 feedback assessment, which learners will complete at the beginning of their training program. So learners will rate themselves as well as ask supporters, which can be their managers, their peers, team members, to share feedback. And this usually is an amazing conversation starter, especially when their own rating differs from the rating of their supporters, from which then often, well, intentions for a program or bigger growth ambitions follow. And then lastly, we share manager packages before every training topic. So the program announcement is shared at the beginning of the program, and manager packages are shared before every training session. And in this package, they can find an overview of the learning objectives of that training, the most important theory that we'll be practicing with, as well as some conversation starters for their one-on-ones. So really some practical questions that they can ask on the goals that they have set. Some inspiration on sharing some personal experiences that they have around this topic as a manager, for example, but also to create those learning opportunities on the job. Well, then next to this, we also create a buddy group. And the buddy groups are created at the start of the program and are peers of the learners within their training group. And buddies can have numerous roles in each other's learning experiences. So they can hold each other accountable, they can act as mirror agents, but they can also support each other really in reaching those goals. And this buddy or peer coaching happens during each classroom. So they, for example, provide feedback to each other or discuss their goals, but they also happen outside of the classroom. So in the Lepaya app, in their post bites, as I just described, buddy groups are encouraged to meet up and complete the so-called buddy bite. And the buddy bite includes reflective questions or little exercises to discuss together after the training session. So they can check in on how things are going, applying their skills, see how they can possibly help each other out and reach those goals, as well as get ready for that next session. So by doing all of these things, we were able to make learning stick. So we see that by making it relevant, 75% of the pre-bites are completed. So learning the learn phase then sets us up to make sure that we have enough time and room to really focus on that practice in the classroom, where more than 80% of the learners will practice with their own or a relatable case. And by then committing to that application of those skills at the end of the classroom session, we see that the application rate is above 60%. So learners will apply their skills in the next 2 weeks. Well, we've covered a lot. I've tried to share as many things as possible on how to make learning stick along the way. So I hope I was able to inspire you with some concrete tips and tricks. Please share your thoughts in chat. What's one action that you'll take away from today's session? And in the meantime, I'll also catch up. Well, the AI learnings. Yeah, happy to tell a bit more about that as well. Group size. Yes, let's definitely touch upon both of those in the Q&A for a bit. So to wrap up, if you take away one thing on how to make learning stick, I hope for it to be that learning doesn't start nor stop in the classroom. So to make learning stick, you really need a deliberate design. So make sure that those training programs are connected to real work by working with relevant cases, real challenges, personal cases. Then make sure that there's room to practice inside as well as outside of that training room. And lastly, ensure that reinforcement by creating that support system. So really involve those managers and peers. Cool. Thank you again for joining today. I'll open up the floor to questions now. If you have any, I already saw the first ones coming in, which is great. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And I'll make sure to stay around to discuss those. If you need to hop off, thanks again for joining, and I hope to see you during one of our next webinars or a one-on-one session where we can discover how to make learning stick for your organization. Thank you. Cool. So maybe first of all, on group size, we usually work with a group of 12 learners. So that is very different from an 800 people audience, where indeed it is a lot more challenging to really have those interventions where you can work with your personal cases. We really believe that in order to have impact and to bring about behavioral change and really have learners apply and change that behavior, a group size of 12 usually is ideal, because this will ensure that there is enough psychological safety within the room to share your own experiences. There is enough time for everyone to practice, to receive personal feedback. So for a group of 800 people, I think it is really difficult to ensure the same level of impact, let alone then also application rate once you scale up to a group of 800. And then I saw some from Lucas, a question on AI. So AI, we really try to, it's part of our full learner experience. So let me maybe go back to the learn, practice, apply slide. So this learn, practice, apply approach is a cycle that happens for every training module. But of course, the learner journey starts before the first training session. And here we already make use of AI. So we have developed an AI coach that will interact with the learners. We'll ask them a little bit more about their role, the organization that they work at, the work environment that they're in, the challenges that they might have. And by interacting with them on this, they will in the end derive to an intention that they have. So an overarching growth ambition for that program. And by setting this growth ambition and this intention, they can then, during the training sessions, link the goals that they set for each of the skills to that bigger intention. So this is an example where we use AI. Secondly, AI is used in both the learn and the apply phase in our bites. So we have role plays. Some of them are free flow, others are more really scenarios. But by interacting with an AI avatar, they can practice, for example, their feedback conversation skills, or they can record a presentation of themselves, and using AI, they will then receive a lot of feedback on verbal as well as non-verbal communication, which they can then bring to the classroom session. Happy to share a bit more about this, as well as some materials offline. But AI definitely is something that we use in the digital experience. So at the moment, it is not part of the classroom experience yet. We are looking into this. We're researching this at the moment, but currently mostly part of the learn and the apply phase, so the digital journey. Just quickly looking at the questions. Also feel free to otherwise unmute if you have any other questions. And I see another question on content.
I think the question there is, Sophie, which skill trainings does Lepaya cover? So like which categories of skills do we specifically cover?
So we train power skills, which is function agnostic. So we train soft skills as well as a few more hard skills that will really empower and set up employees for success. So think of power skills like collaboration and communication, analytical thinking, leadership, resilience, intentional learning. So it's all the skills that enable you to be your best self at work, apart from the more job-specific skills. And then another question by Ray. Please let me know if that answered your question, and otherwise happy to deep dive a bit more on it. Question by Ray. Can you give an example how to prepare learners for a case that can be practiced in this session? So learners will find a bite online, which is usually a little text bite where they will be asked to reflect on a situation. So let's take a very practical example of impactful influencing. We have a training around the topic of impactful influencing where learners will, first of all, learn all about the theory there is about influencing skills. And then we will ask them to reflect and think of a conversation or a situation that they have had where they needed their influencing skills. So for example, someone they were collaborating or communicating with did not show the behavior that would help them reach their goal or the common goal. We will ask them to reflect on who this conversation was with, what happened during that conversation, what the goal was of them when interacting with this person. So to really make sure that we have all of the context for them to then practice this conversation again with the trainer or training actor in the classroom. So usually it's always guided questions that will then bring them to shaping the case for themselves.
And maybe another question on scalability of training. So I think one question was like, how do we deliver for 800 people? So say you're an L&D manager, you've got your set budget, you want to upskill a group of 800 in total. How do you then go about, we said that we split it into 8 to 12 people, but then is that 20 groups that we would do, or how would it work on the delivery and operational side of that?
Yes, so I would indeed always advise to break that group into groups of 12 to really make sure that you can have the impact and that behavior change that you're aiming for. I think that is also the discussion to have with your stakeholders in case they are pushing for bigger groups. Operationally, what this would look like is indeed groups of 12. We can facilitate either virtual or face-to-face. Could all be on the same day. Where I think it's also important to mention that we don't see a difference in terms of effectiveness between virtual or face-to-face training sessions. Of course, some topics that might be a bit more personal or sensitive are nice to facilitate face-to-face, but also virtually we see really great results. And in terms of scalability and the operational side, well, we are an end-to-end partner, so we would take care of all of this to then make sure that all of these groups can be facilitated virtually or face-to-face on the same day. Cool. Anything else? Any other questions? No? Cool. Then I will thank you again for joining today. And please feel free if any questions still pop up to reach out. Happy to continue our conversation. And otherwise, let's make sure to stay in touch. And I hope to see you around during one of our next webinars. Thank you.